Let's go for it!
I like the dark stuff. Give me the dark stuff. I like the dark stuff. Give me the dark stuff.
Hey there, everybody, it's me, your buddy Dave, the host here at the Dark Stuff channel on YouTube. Thanks a lot for checking in with the new video, and that's right, it's this time of year. I'm actually a little late to the game here. I meant to do this about 2-3 weeks ago. Life kind of caught up with me. It's the holidays, you understand how it is. So we're finally doing the top albums of 2022, and like I do with every year, we're going to do 20 through 11 in the form of a quick little video presentation, and then I'm going to rejoin you to discuss the top 10.
From the pipes down in the basement, bare feet on a concrete floor. Not just
I love you. I wanna tell you I love you 'cause I love you. I wanna flip through the paper, ticking through the number.
Red, white, and blue. Today I'm so on the run. Heartstrings tomorrow.
Oh, take me back to the first drink of one blue jeans. Don't wanna be your last pick. Any mention and I fall into.
Got me here.
Not a long time ago when I knew all the answers.
We used to write this song with snow piled up.
Hopefully you dug that. There's a lot of cool records that just didn't quite make the top 10. In general, though, I have to say that I was a little disappointed in 2022 overall as a year for music. There were still a ton of great records, and when I was making my list, I got to about 50 albums that I felt were solid and worthy of perhaps being included, and then I whittled it down to 40 to 30 to 20, and that's where we are now. Also, for those of you that do the streaming thing, I did make playlists for both Spotify and Apple Music that's below that features a couple of cuts from all of the albums in the top 20.
Let's do this.
Coming in at the number 10 spot is the newest album from indie rock legends Built to Spill. It's called When the Wind Forgets Your Name. It's the band's 9th album in their nearly 30-year career, going all the way back to their debut, which came out in 1993, right after band leader Doug Marsh left his old group, The Tree People, and decided to form Built to Spill. This is the band's first album for the Sub Pop label. They've been involved with Warner Brothers since 1996. It was an extremely long tenure, especially for a band that never really sold a ton of records, never really had that big hit or whatever, yet they had a 20-plus year relationship with a major label, and I think that has a lot to do with the whole Jamie Cano thing. They never spent a lot of money making albums. They never spent a lot of money in tour support or any of that stuff, so their records were made a profit even though they didn't sell a ton of copies, and that is kind of the key in the major label system, because they just want to make money, period. The album is full of, familiar Built to Spill territory. You got your catchy indie rock songs with the occasional diversions into sort of prog rock and classic rock. This particular album features a lineup with 2 Brazilian musicians that Doug met while lining up guys to do a tour of South America. He kind of, I guess, went into it cold, met these dudes when he got down to Brazil, liked them, ended up vibing with them, recording an album. So the guys that play on this record are not actually the people that you see with Built to Spill out on their current tour. So I guess their next album, whenever that would come out, will feature those particular musicians. Now, the one thing I will say about the album is I feel like the production is just a little bit flat. You don't really hear the drums. They're kind of buried in the mix. Doug's voice still sounds great, and his guitars sound pretty good, but I kind of wanted a little bit more maybe post-production flair in the sounds, and that's the only thing really disappointed. The songs are great. My favorite tracks on the record, Fool's Gold, Elements, and Never All Right. Coming in at number 9 is the debut album from a New York via Chicago band called Horse Girl. The album, Versions of Modern Performance, is just a smorgasbord of amazing 90s punk, indie, alternative reference points. You can hear so much late 80s, early 90s stuff. I would say you hear Sonic Youth, you hear Stereolab, you hear Mission to Burma, you hear Unwound, you hear Unrest, you hear all sorts of stuff mixed in really well together so that it's not too overt with any one artist, although a strong Sonic Youth influence does appear. You know, these guys are just right out of high school, and my feeling is I'm wondering if their parents have really, really cool record collections, and that's what inspired them to learn about this music, because it does almost seem like, I mean, hell, they're old enough to be my kids. They could be mining my record collection, and this would be great if more bands were influenced by this exact same stuff. The world would be such a better place. The band is joined by former Sonic Youth members Lee Ronaldo on guitar and Steve Shelley on bass. They play on 2 particular tracks, Beautiful Song and Billy. Since this band is so young, I know they have a lot of life left, and I'm really looking forward to what they do on future records. As far as the best tracks on this current record, I would go with Anti-Glory, Dirtbag Transformation, Still Dirty, Beautiful Song, Homage to Birdnoculars, whatever that means.
Gets counted every swipe of the thumb.
Coming in at number 8, my good friends, the Mommy Heads, who once again sent me a mug. They're going to do a new mug for each album, I guess. This is for the newest album, Genius Killer. This is either the 14th or 15th album from this New York band, depending on how you count it, because they've had some reissues over the last few years, and they've had a compilation that was made by somebody, maybe not that, I don't know. So it's either the 14th or 15th album from these guys. Genius Killer is the follow-up to their number 1 album, Here on the Dark Stuff, the number 1 album, Age of Isolation from 2021. That album captured a really specific moment in time that all of us around the world shared, and that was being isolated due to the pandemic and different ways of trying to reach out for communication and this and that. And I think that universalness of theme is what made that album connect with me so hard and made it that it's maybe going to end up ultimately being the band's best. But the follow-up is this new record, Genius Killer, and it is no slouch either. Generally, the Mommy Heads music features kind of a healthy mix of sort of like sophisticated pop and a little bit of prog rock. I only say prog rock because the guys are very, very good musicians. There's also an element of jam music every now and again, too. So they get compared to XTC all the time, and although I don't think it's a perfectly valid comparison, it's not a bad comparison to be compared to something like that, a really sophisticated, smart pop band with like really, really great musicianships. This album still does have that mix, but I would say that they've managed to take it in a slightly different direction and make it still sound fresh and new and different. The album, again, is a lyrical and musical tour de force, top-notch stuff from the Mommy Heads, again, continuing on this mega peak in their like 30th year, beyond 30, 35 years in the business, 33, something like that. Best tracks, of course, are Impulse Item, Genius Killer, and Privilege. Coming in at number 7 is something that really, really took me by surprise, and an album that I was not even anticipating giving a shit about, to be perfectly frank, and that is the album from Weird Nightmare. And the reason why I say that is because the album is actually sort of a solo project from Alex Edkins of the band Metz. He's a guitar player and the singer. And although I love the band Metz, they're one of the most brutally heavy bands. They're kind of in that realm of like Unsane, in that they're really, really, really heavy, but they don't really fit in the heavy metal scene, so they kind of are still sort of considered kind of punk rock. But when Alex did a solo project, basically because touring was sort of shelved during COVID, and he had a young kid that he was taking care of at home, he started working on this different kind of stuff. So the album was kind of recorded sporadically over the 2 years of COVID. And what came out was this really, really different sound that blew me away. It reminded me very much of late 80s, early 90s Flaming Lips, crossed with that same period of Mercury Rev. And, you know, Mercury Rev started off kind of like two of the guys were in Flaming Lips. So the merging of that period. So we're talking about albums like Hit to Death in the Future Head by The Lips or Boses by Mercury Rev. It's just wild, crazy pop music. Really just, listen in headphones because you really notice the intricacies of all the cool guitar parts that are going on. Lyrically, I got no idea what he's talking about, but it's really cool. It's another side to Alex Edkins and Metz. I didn't know they had this side. I was so impressed with this record. I'm almost at a point where, like, I'd rather they just continue with Weird Nightmare. And, like, I mean, no disrespect to Metz. They're great, but this is much better. My favorite tracks, Searching for You, Oh No, and Lusitania.
Like a meteor, I'll glow.
Okay, coming in at number 6 is the return of the Yeah Yeah Yeahs. Yeah Yeah Yeahs have been a huge band over the last 20 years, but they did kind of disappear for a while. And this new album, Cool It Down, is their first new album since 2013's Mosquito. Mosquito is actually kind of an underrated album, but that's neither here nor there. The band named the album Cool It Down. They took the title from the song by the Velvet Underground, which appears on Loaded. And much in the same way that Loaded was a little bit different album from the Velvet Underground, maybe a more streamlined sound, that's kind of what the Yeah Yeah Yeahs did on this album too. Velvet Underground's motivations in 1969 may have been to get a song on the radio, and I don't think that's necessarily what the Yeah Yeah Yeahs are doing. They've had songs on the radio. Everyone knows Maps. But typically, the Yeah Yeah Yeahs sound kind of mixes between sort of slow, kind of moody, synthy stuff, and then some guitar ragers. Nick Zinner is a great guitar player when he really wants to rage on it. This album leans a lot more into the slow, the moodier material, and more on the synth and the keyboards, much less on the guitars. There really aren't any real ragers on this one. Fleas is a song that comes kind of close, that might resemble something that you might have heard on their earlier stuff. The opening track, Spitting Off the Edge of the World, is a collaboration along with Perfume Genius, and that particular single is nominated for a Grammy this year. Despite the album coming in at only 32 minutes, and the last track is under 2, and it's really a poem that Karen O is reciting to her son, okay, and that's cool, but it's not much of a song. The album is like 30 minutes, and I don't know, when you've been gone 9 years and you come back, I feel like you have to give a little bit more than 30 minutes of new music. That's just me, though. The 30 they did give us is pretty freaking great, and that's why it comes in at number 6. But it could have been a little longer. Favorite tracks, of course, Spitting Off the Edge of the World, Blacktop, Burning, and Different Today. Indie rock legends Spoon return with the number 5 album, Lucifer on the Sofa. This is the band's 10th album, their first since 2017's Hot Thoughts. Now, in my opinion, the 2017 album Hot Thoughts was the band's worst. It was terrible. It didn't even make my top 30. I didn't like it at all, and I assumed that was almost the end of Spoon. I was like, how can you put out something that's this weak when you're such a great band? Because Spoon has been so fantastic ever since their 1996 debut. Well, something happened over the next couple of years because, COVID happened, we know that. So the album was recorded sporadically over the course of about 3 years with Britt working with some different kind of musicians over that time and different producers. Most of the album was produced by a guy named Mark Rankin, who Britt said that he got into because he liked his work with Adele. The same Adele, right. And Queens of the Stone Age. But don't be getting confused and thinking this album somehow sounds like Adele. It doesn't. It still sounds like Spoon. In fact, it sounds more like a band than their last maybe two records or so. And it's weird because there are some new band members, and it was recorded over time, not just like a bunch of guys getting into a room and playing. So it's great how you can get that kind of band feel, even though it was a lot of new people performing together. Critics seem to love the album, saying many people were saying it's their best ever. I'm not going that far, but I do think it is the best they've done in many, many, many years. Maybe since, probably it's better than They Want My Soul, so you go back. I don't know. I'm not going to delve through the entire catalog. That's for a different video. But I agree, it is really, really, really solid. And coming off that last album, which I was just so disappointed by, this is an absolute return to form. And by the way, there's an alternate version of the album called Lucifer on the Moon, which is a dub remix version of the album. I haven't listened to that. I kind of don't care. But for those who are perhaps interested, there's an alternative version of the album called Lucifer on the Moon. But as far as Lucifer on the Sofa goes, my favorite tracks are The Hardest Cut, Wild, and The Devil and Mrs. Jones. The highest charting rock veteran on my countdown this year is Elvis Costello. And this year's album with Elvis Costello and the Imposters, called The Boy Named If, it's technically Elvis's 32nd album. Now that includes, you know, with the Imposters, with the Attractions, by himself, maybe with the Brodsky Quartet, maybe with Burt Bacharach. Who knows what that counts? I just read that somewhere that it's number 32. The album, by the way, is also nominated for Best Rock Album Grammy, along with Spoon, which was our number 5 album. So one of those two maybe will get the Grammy. Who knows? These songs are great. They're well played. They're very well produced. 13 classic songs from Elvis Costello. I don't know how he still comes up with this much good material, yet he does. And actually, the album is probably his most consistently rock album since the 80s, maybe. I mean, one critic, I was reading the review, and it said this is his most rocking album since Blood and Chocolate. I don't know, maybe so. Blood and Chocolate is my favorite Elvis record of his entire catalog, so it's hard for me to say because that's just like sacred ground there, but I do understand the point. Best songs on the record: Penelope Halfpenny, Magnificent Hurt, and What If I Can't Give You Anything But Love.
my God, what makes you think you're good enough to think about me when it's you with your...
The number 3 spot belongs to the debut album from Wet Leg, and this is a UK duo featuring 2 women named Rhiann Tisdale and Esther Chambers. Now, the 2 of them formed only in 2019. This is their absolute debut album, and when their first song came out, Chase Long, in 2021, that song became the most buzzed about song in the last 20 years or so. I haven't seen a band rise to that level of interest where they're already planning a U.S. headlining tour based on one freaking song. The song is that good, but I mean, really? That fast? The songs are insanely catchy, deceptively simple, fun, yet kind of dark lyrics in a way, because a lot of them are being about that period in your life. Maybe you haven't gotten there yet. Maybe you're looking at this in the rearview mirror like I am, but that sort of period where you hit your early 30s, where you're not really feeling like you want to just settle down and be a suburban house husband, housewife, house whatever. You're not quite there yet, but at the same time, you're not in that vibe like you were in your 20s where you want to party all night and do all the, you know, so you're in this weird combination, this weird spot in life, and I feel like that's where a lot of the songs are about. I'm too old for this, I'm too young for this, I'm too old for this, I'm too young for this, I'm in this weird position. I've told people that I feel like Wet Leg is the modern day Elastica, and it's not because they sound like Elastica, but if you were around at the time in, I think, 1994-95 when that Elastica album came out, they came out of nowhere, okay? Everybody liked it because you could hear little elements of every other band that you've already liked. You know, they mix, Wet Leg and Elastica both mix so many classic elements. They mix post-punk, new wave, garage rock, psychedelic music, grunge, glam, etc. You blend it all together, and like it is, it's an enjoyable distillation of a million other records you've already heard, okay? Now, Elastica did deliver that brilliant album, and then we barely ever heard from them again. They did have a follow-up a few years later, but the story was already over. I'm hoping Wet Leg can deliver a new album in 2023 and move on in development of their sound, because it is really, really good. This is a brilliant debut. I would like to see it followed up by an even better second album. My favorite songs on this record are Angelica, Wet Dream, and Chase Long.
I could say what I've been thinking, but I never have done.
The number 2 album this year comes from a band who claims the artist at number 1 is an inspiration to them. Now, I can't tell you what that is because that would be giving away what number 1 is. But number 2 belongs to a New Zealand 4-piece pop band called The Beths, and their newest album is called Expert in a Dying Field. This is the third album from The Beths. The core of the band consists of course, Elizabeth Stokes. She's the singer and guitar player, and Jonathan Pierce, who is the lead guitarist, and he also does vocals. But really, the 4 members of the band all do vocals, so giving it almost like, I don't know, Bangles kind of a feel or something. And their harmonies are what make the songs so cool. Now, they are very guitar driven, really, really great power pop, indie rock, whatever kind of terminology you want to use. New Zealand has such an amazing legacy of indie rock music going back all the way to the 80s and probably even earlier. I'm just not familiar with it much earlier than that. The Beths are a fine addition to that scene. This album is so freaking good. 12 brilliant pop gems that just flow seamlessly into one another. Hard to pick favorite songs, but my favorites were Knees Deep, the title track Expert in a Dying Field, and Silence is Golden. Coming in at number 1 is the third album from Canadian indie rockers Always. The band returns with the newest Blue Rev. It's their first album since 2017's. Now, their sound is definitely power pop, indie rock. The singer of the band, her name is Molly Rankin, okay? And she says her personal influences are, and this is important, that's I'm going to actually read it, okay? The Magnetic Fields, Teenage Fan Club, Dolly Mixture, The Smiths, Celine Dion, Pavement, The Primitives, and Oasis. And you can hear elements of literally every single one of those groups. I'm not really sure who Dolly Mixture is, so never mind on that one. But you can hear elements of all of those groups in the songs. So unlike all those other influences, you know, you can't point to a specific one. You just can feel it when you're listening to it, you know? If you like great guitar, if you like catchy songs, if you like fun lyrics, Always Blue Rev gives it to you. There is no question about this. I love this album from start to finish. It took me a second, and actually, for a long time, I thought that Wet Leg would be my number 1, or perhaps the Mommy Heads Again, or something like that. But just Always came on so strong in these last couple of weeks when I was, you know, formulating my list and everything. It ended up being the only choice for number 1. Best songs: Easy on Your Own, Pharmacist, and the song Tom Verlaine, dedicated to the guitarist from the band Television. All right, everyone, hope you dug that list. Again, I've got playlists below. I've got a link to my blog for my radio show so you can see what maybe some of the other ones were beyond number 20. Happy New Year, and I will see everyone in 2023.